Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided.
This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy is sponsored by Thomson Reuters, providing legal professionals with the intelligence, technology, and human expertise they need to find trusted answers. Products include Westlaw, Practical Law, and Firm Central legal practice management software for small law firms. Thomson Reuters, the answer company. Online at thomsonreuters.com. Access to Democracy is made possible in part by a donation from Firefly Credit Union. Firefly is the new name of U.S. Federal Credit Union, which has proudly served the financial needs of the Greater Twin Cities community since 1925. At Firefly, we guide our members forward and give them the power to chase dreams by delivering the financial solutions they need to get ahead. From checking accounts to mortgages, we'll light the way. We are Firefly Credit Union, and this is Life Illuminated. And Dr. Charles Crutchfield of award-winning Crutchfield Dermatology in Eagan, acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. A Minnesota native who trained at the Mayo Clinic, Dr. Crutchfield personally treats all patients and states that experience counts and quality matters. Crutchfield Dermatology. Look good, feel great, with beautiful skin.
Welcome to Access to Democracy. Alan Miller, your host, back with you, and a return guest. I should say return, many-time guest Senator Jim Carlson, who's been with us for, 13, 15 years now,
Something
I think.
like that, yes.
Yeah, it's 15 since 2002, right.
Yeah.
We
When
have
I
a
was
good
in
thing
neophyte,
going, we
yeah.
might as well keep it going.
Yeah. I think I get my recharges when I come here.
Good. Well, you are always willing to come here and answer easy questions and tough questions. I have been trying, and for many years, I had Congressman John Klein, who was willing to do the same thing, even though politically he and I had very different views on things, whereby you and I probably philosophically much closer.
About 80%, yes.
I have tried time and again to tender invitations to our current Congressman, Jason Lewis, and he says he has town halls. It means I get a phone call and said, if you want to listen to Congressman Lewis, I have never bitten you. I have never bitten, actually, anybody of any persuasion. We've had Green Party, we've had conservatives, we've had libertarians, we've had Democrats, we've had Republicans, as I said. I cannot entice Congressman Lewis on the show.
Well, that seems to be a habit that has happened in the last few years now. Is nationally, the Republicans were riding a popular wave a few years ago, and when it's turned the other way, then they've shut off any communication with their constituents. For instance, just last week when we had the 4th of July parade, I had the Pioneer Press reporter come and ask me, how is it going for me? And I said that it really was very well, and in fact it was. The second biggest reception I've gotten, I got a very good reception in 2013, a lot of applause. And this year I was also getting applause, which was kind of surprising. But he said, Congressman Lewis is getting a lot of heckling from the audience. And, and I said, he said he's getting a lot of heckling, and then there are some that don't know who he is. And I said, well, that's the difference. I've lived here my entire life, and he doesn't live in the district. So that could be one of the reasons. But also that, unfortunately, Congressman Lewis has not had any face-to-face town hall meetings, even though I've been to 3 of them that he's been asked to, and I've spoken at 2 of them. and they're nonpartisan. They're not Democrats, not arranged by me. I just showed up to them.
Well, it would be the same here. You know, I would ask questions about one's votes on certain things. Maybe he doesn't want to explain how he voted or why he voted. You know, that's the only thing I can figure. But it's not as though there's going to be a trick question coming out of left field. But
well, I have to give him a little bit of, cut him a little bit of slack in that he's new. And when I was new to the Senate, there's a lot of things you don't know. And I think there's a problem where some of the Republicans are afraid of those words, I don't know.
But he was a media personality. You were not.
That's true. Yep.
You acclimated to your position. I'm looking here at this year's legislative agenda here. There's like 13 or 14 Carlson bills. Now, I know in your first year there were not 13 or 14 Carlson bills, but you have reached senior status now, where you're very well respected, and I say that knowing full well, having spoken to other legislators. And as a matter of fact, we had a Republican senator in here not too long ago who was a freshman, a doctor, and who you know. And we had a Democratic doctor in here also who was in a first year. And hopefully I'm going to have them back at some time in the fall, the two of them together.
Yes.
But people have survived these interviews. But interestingly enough, people who have been loath to interview end up losing elections. There is a connection between our viewing audience and how they respond to candidates.
Well, it is part of our oath of office. We are supposed to represent our constituents, and the only way you can represent your constituents is to find out what they're thinking. And that's one of the reasons why I will speak to anyone, whether they're friend or foe. There's been a lot of people that I've emailed or communicated with on email that might be on the other side, or at least they indicate that they are, and we can find agreement. There's a lot of bills, a lot of initiatives that we do find agreement, and we go on from there. So it's I represent those folks as well as the folks that are maybe on the left so far that I can't see them. But we represent all of those people, and it's our job to figure out how to represent them effectively within our responsibilities in the Constitution. And so that's what I say is that, hey, it's for the better of Minnesota that I listen to everyone.
And of course, that's a reputation that you have earned, as well as the fact that you are one of the most hardworking legislators. The legislature is not in session all year round. Carlson is in session all year round.
Well, that's true. It is. Interestingly, there are things that come up every day, and sometimes they take days to resolve. I have calls that are on my schedule that I need to yet return today, and things like questions on homelessness, questions on one fellow that's behind bars right now. We have to talk about some Medicare issues that it never finishes when that one issue is taken care of. And the fact of the matter is I don't know everything. So I have to go to experts and ask them, how do you deal with this? And especially healthcare, which, one of the things, I went to this meeting last night in Minnetonka, and it was what's called Medicaid. I can't remember the title of the series, but former Governor Arnie Carlson was there. And we talked at length about some of the Medicaid issues that he is very interested in. His wife, I don't know if you know that, but his wife Susan, who was a judge at one time, is also the head of the fetal alcohol syndrome community. And she is working hard to try to get treatment to people as a preventive measure, because a lot of times people who have had that syndrome will eventually wind up in prison. So if they can't deal with their illness, then they might turn to some kind of crime or some other kind of illness-prompted behavior. And if you can keep them out of prison, if you can help them to deal with their disability, they're much better off, and the rest of society is much better off, and the economics are amazing.
Well, that's a perfect example of you. You are the senator in the 51st. Minnetonka is in the other end of the spectrum. But where were you last night? You were at Minnetonka for this forum. I would venture to guess that there were not that many legislators there.
3 of us.
Out of the Senate itself, which has what, 67?
67, and the other 2 legislators were both from the House. So they're from
both from the
134. Yep.
So,
And then we had one in Burnsville about, let's see, it would have been the 23rd of June. And in that one, I was the only legislator that showed up. And that was the one where Senator Franken came and spoke.
Now, do I understand that former Governor Carlson endorsed single payer last night?
Yes, I was very shocked and very pleased. He came out and said that we need to evaluate single payer along with all of the others, and that's something that me as a single payer supporter have wanted for years.
And me for years also. Yeah. I mean, we're talking many, many years.
It's
before Bernie made it fashionable.
Yes, yeah. Well, it was actually before Bernie that Senator Marty was promoting the Minnesota Health Plan, which is a single payer option.
Who has been here on numerous occasions.
Yeah, and it's sooner or later, I think, when after the Republicans exhaust all of their let's say tax cut initiatives for health care, they're going to come to say, this might be a good thing to look at, because we've been protecting the industry for so long, and the industry is taking us to the cleaners. It's like former U.S. Senator Dave Durenberger once said to me that he said, "Jim, you're such an idealist." He said that why would you think that an industry that charges us $2.4 trillion a year for their services be interested in only charging us $1.4 trillion? He said, you have to come to realize that that's idealistic. And I repeat that often. And when I said that to him a couple of years after he said it to me, he said, "Oh my gosh, yeah, that's what I've been saying to people." So that is the truth. We have a lot of rat holes that a lot of our health care dollars are going down, and they don't have a return on investment.
And pharmaceuticals probably even more so in many cases.
Yes, and unfortunately, I think we have an industry that is created to protect the industry. Governor Carlson mentioned that last night, that the lobbyists, national lobbyists for the pharmaceutical industry, are huge and hugely funded. And their effort has been very well rewarded. The United States, is the only country that the major portion of sold pharmaceuticals are not competitively bid, not negotiated pricing. So there's a major opportunity there. Yes.
Of the healthcare system.
And of course, rather than let this go, there's often a response that, oh yes, well, if they don't have the margins, then they can't develop the new drugs.
Yeah, research and development.
Yeah, that is largely a lie, because a lot of these companies are now located overseas. And so they're not subject to American rules. They're just gouging us, and they know it full well. So there's Roche from Switzerland, there's GlaxoSmithKline from the UK, they're all over the world, and they don't need these kinds of margins to develop new products.
And unfortunately, people are not tuned into it.
That's right.
It affects their pocketbook, but they listen to the shiny advertising, and the shiny advertising completely misdirects the truth. I mean, we're seeing that with our national administration right now. and how hard it is to even ascertain the truth from, our president and his, what I call the Trump crime family. But in any event, back to Minnesota. We advertised this as you reporting on the recent legislative session. The fact of the matter is, the recent session is still not over.
That's right. Yeah.
Explain that.
Still not over. There was a funny thing that happened on the last night. Now, there was hassles back and forth. And, when you talk about the national death of truth, that has filtered down into states as well. In our state, we have had a lot of I don't know if I can call it fake news, but it certainly is disingenuous statements, deceptive statements, wrong statements, and lies. And for instance, in the 2016 session, we had an issue with a bonding bill that was sent over to the House, and the House adjourned so they wouldn't have to vote on it. And then the next day, the Speaker of the House said, it didn't get there in time. But the problem is he knew it was coming over, and he adjourned 10 minutes early. So that's the kind of thing that was happening, and now it's happening in the 2017 session as well. We had, and no one likes omnibus bills, because omnibus bills are these bills that, excuse me.
Everything but the kitchen sink.
Everything is in there, even things I like. I had something that got passed in an omnibus bill this year. That was a bill that I passed last year, and it didn't get to final vote in the House, and it was put into the omnibus transportation bill this year. So, of course, I like it that it was in there, but I don't like it that it was in this big garbage bill, we call it. And
these bills are hundreds of pages.
Usually, yes. Yep.
And especially like in last year's session, even assuming that they didn't adjourn 10 minutes early, you get a bill like this the last day of the session that's got 300, 400 pages to it. It's impossible, no matter what kind of staff you have, and you only have a very limited staff, to be able to go through that bill and know what's in it. And we know from Speaker Doubt that he will slip things in unannounced and hope that they will avoid scrutiny.
And that's what happened. In the last hour of the session, there was a bill that was the bill for funding the departments in government, funding, the Department of Corrections, funding the Department of Administration, Department of Revenue, all of those agencies
We're
that bill
this
funds.
Year now.
That's this year. That's
Yes.
2017. And that bill was presented, and it was turned down. It was actually vetoed. And then it was presented again, and then it was presented again. And now that's a bill that spends money. It appropriates money. So it has to originate in the House. And when it came to the Senate this year, there was a little insert that everyone missed. And that's where it said that this section, meaning the section that funds the Department of Revenue, is effective after enactment of House File 1. House File 1 was the tax bill, meaning that if the tax bill was vetoed or not signed, then the Department of Revenue would not be funded. And now, when Dayton caught that, and it was Dayton's people that caught it, I voted for that bill. I didn't know that was in there. And there's no way that you can read hundreds of pages of bills in the last hour. Not only did I not know it, but none of the Republicans in the Senate knew it. Even Paul Gazelka, the Republican majority leader, said that he didn't know that that was in the bill. He has stated that in public.
Because it was slipped in by
It
Doubt.
was slipped in last minute, and it was passed in the House without them knowing about it, and then it went to the Senate. And what oftentimes happens is that the House will pass these bills at the last minute and then adjourn. And they adjourn so that we would not be able to amend it and send it back over to be
Or you can't
revoted.
have a conference committee that
That's right.
would work it
Well,
out.
this was already a conference committee document that it has to have an up or down vote. And if we vote it down, then it would have to come back again, and we'd have to do a new bill in a conference committee. But those are the kinds of things that were happening
And that's
this year.
not doing the people's work.
That's right.
That's what you're there for, is to do the people's work, not to play games, especially subterfuge, especially really backhanded, sneaky material.
So what the governor did is he vetoed the two lines for the House and the Senate budgets. And he has the authority to do that, given by the Constitution.
Line item veto
Line
is
item
what
veto.
they call it.
I believe that was voted into the Constitution in 1896. It's in the 1800s, where the governor can line item veto any appropriation.
And these people, and when I say these people, I mean all legislators, and certainly most people, know that line item veto has been mentioned for years
Yes.
and years
Yeah.
here, well over a century.
He can only do it with an appropriation. He can't do it with a policy. And this was an appropriation. So now, and people say, you can't do that because that's another branch of government. But they tried to do it with the Department of Revenue. So it really, if what you did was okay, then what he did is okay.
And that case is presently where? In the Court of Appeals?
It's right now in a special judiciary. A special judge has heard it and will give his, and I guess you'd call it a district court, because it's a district court judge, and then whichever side loses may appeal it to the Supreme Court. And that'll probably happen I'd say within August, because September, they got together and the House and the Senate and the judge agreed to fund the legislature until October 1st. So it is, first of all, it is fundable. They can do it with an executive order, and they did agree to fund it until then and until it goes through to the Supreme Court.
So the session, which is mandated to close by a certain date, open and close by a certain date, is in limbo.
The regular session has to close by the second Tuesday of May, or third Tuesday of May. The special session that was called right after was called the next day, and then that closed. And now what we're going to do is call another special session. So special sessions are just that, special sessions. They have an opening date and a closing date. The regular session is still in session, and that will reconvene in February and go to May again. So it's a little confusing.
Confusing,
Yeah.
unnecessarily confusing when you have situations like this which arise.
Yeah. A lot of little details that one can talk about and go through, but it's suffice to say that we're not done.
And you've had some bills that passed this year also.
I didn't have any bills that passed in a Senate floor vote. I had them pass in the omnibus bills.
Right.
Yes. And then the one that I really pushed on pretty hard was our hands-free cell phone bill. And that requires, if you use a cell phone during driving, that it has to be a hands-free type, or it's not something that you hold up in a hand.
Which
to your ear.
has been a cause of yours for several years
Yes,
now.
about 4
yes.
sessions I've pushed that. And I think it's going to go now. I have 2 Republicans who are co-sponsors, and we had a little problem that is not the bill's fault, and that was that Senator Warren Limmer had a heart attack. And he was out a few days at the time of the deadlines. And so we didn't get it to his committee in time. But I have assurances from some Republicans that they're going to be on board when it comes back.
And we have a Senate that is divided by one vote also.
Yes.
Not unlike the U.S. Senate at the moment, where it's 52 to 48, and we're seeing so much every day about the health care bill. Well, here in Minnesota, it's one vote differential, 34-33.
34-33, and which I thought would make things a little easier than it did, and it really didn't, because they decided that they were going to go for broke here. They were going to act like they were not coming back in the majority and trying to get as many things through with those 34 votes. Now, in general, if there's a bill, it should stand on its own, it should be passed, And if it's not passed, then you have a couple of options. One is to soften it a little bit. The other one is to try to override. But what they did is they, whenever there was a person missing, they would just not take up any controversial bills. And that was one of the problems that extended
Tremendous
the
power
session.
of the majority leader in that regard,
Yes.
as there is in the federal system also.
Yeah, yeah.
So-
And the fact of the matter is that, I've never been in a 34-33 majority before, but we always tried to, attract some Republican votes. And I still do that. With my bills, I try to get a Republican on it as well, so that we can get all the views on any bill that goes
It's there
through.
to serve the people, not to serve the party. Across the aisle, with the current leadership, it seems to be to serve the party and not the people.
Yes, yeah.
To me, anyway. And actually, the Republican Senator Jensen,
Yes.
first-termer, medical doctor, did cross the aisle
Yep.
to vote on a health care bill. And when he was here, we talked about it, and he said, I'm there to serve the people. This was for the benefit of people's health.
That's right.
But he got a tremendous amount of really kickback from the Republicans.
Well, I have to say one good thing about Dr. Jensen. He came to me after the session and he said, are you going to bring up that hands-free bill next year? And I said, yep, it's still alive. And he said, count me as one of the supporters. So he's on the side of getting that passed next year.
Well, I remember when 7 Republicans crossed over during the Pawlenty administration, again, because they felt, and I don't remember which bill it was,
Transportation.
desperately needed, as we do, to pay attention to the infrastructure as well. And what happened is the Pawlenty regime ran primaries against all 7 of them because they crossed over on a conscience vote, and 6 of them lost.
That's one difference that the two parties have is the Democratic Party, or the DFL, has never, ever told me how to vote. They have never threatened me with a vote. Now, I've had other senators be very unhappy with the way I've voted, but that's because our district leanings are different ways. But we've never had a vote come down from on high. The Republican Party frequently has that kind of situation.
Give marching orders. That's why if you want to see what the Republican position is on any given day in the federal situation, just watch Fox News.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
And that will tell you immediately what today's line is. And actually, we have used up almost our entire half hour, and we haven't gotten to so many things of substance. So
Oh, yes.
we got to
Well,
have you back here in a month or so.
Yeah, next
And
time we have to talk about Mercer and Heartland Institute. I want to connect those two names.
Okay. Senator Jim Carlson, Access to Democracy, thank you so much.
Thank you, Alan.